Hey y'all, welcome to the channel. I'm Task Force Bourbon. As you can see before you, we're going to be doing another blind flight fight. This time from Four Roses single barrel lineup. We're going to talk a little bit at first about Four Roses history, a little bit about their master distiller lineage as of late, and then talking a little bit about each one of these things. But real quick up front, essentially what we have here before us is your standard off-the-shelf single barrel offering from Four Roses. You can pick this up anywhere you go. That's one of the cool things about Four Roses. If you like them, you can find them. Unlike some of the other distillers that are out there nowadays. Definitely recommend checking this out. We'll see where it falls in against. This is the single barrel strength private select noted by the PS here. But this one's maybe a bit more special as it was specially selected by Brent Elliott. I'm trying to get this in frame here. That light is pretty vicious. Let me just do a little back and forth until it wants to act right. There we go. Brent Elliott, Master Distiller Selected, Recipe Mash Bill OBSV. That's going to come into play here in a minute when we talk about Four Roses really writ large and about their mash bill strains and yeast and whatnot, what have you. I'll explain what those letters mean, but all single barrel regular off the shelf is OBSV. So there are 10 different mash bills that they use, and again we'll get into that. I'm kind of spoiling a little bit here now, but this one specifically I selected from the offerings that are available because we can compare when we do the blind flight fight which one is in fact actually better. Is it worth trying to seek out? I'm sure it is, but I've already had some. This is not a fresh pop, so we'll see exactly where it fits in. But real quick, like I promised, we'll talk about Four Roses, history and origin story, as it were. So Four Roses Distillery was founded by Paul Jones Jr. in 1884. The legend has it that Jones came up with the name Four Roses as a result of a romantic interest with a Southern belle. When Jones asked a young lady to the grand ball, the young lady advised Jones that he would know his answer if she wore a corsage of Four Roses. You can see where this is going. As it turns out, the young lady did in fact accept Jones's proposal as she wore the Four Rose corsage, and the rest is history. So he named his future distillery after his most fondest memory, which brings us to the banks of the Salt River, nestled in the quiet Kentucky countryside near Lawrenceburg. Four Roses Distillery is a testament to American ingenuity and perseverance. Built in 1910 to resemble the architecture of California wineries, the distillery, now listed on a National Register of Historic Places, was one of 6 distilleries that was granted permission to operate during Prohibition. Following Prohibition, Four Roses Kentucky Straight Bourbon became the top-selling bourbon in the United States. In 1943, Seagram's bought the distillery and a decade later discontinued the sale of Four Roses Kentucky Straight Bourbon. In 2002, the distillery changed hands again, and the new owner brought a renewed sense of purpose and vigor to Four Roses, bringing back that bourbon. So talking a little bit about the regular single real quick. Four Roses single barrel, like I said, uses that same OBSV mash bill recipe, which is a 60% corn, 35% rye, and 5% malted barley. So if you like Four Roses is known to be a high rye bourbon. So if you like this, you might even find yourself liking rye whiskeys. Straight bourbon must be aged, as we know, for at least 2 years, whereas Four Roses bourbon is aged a minimum of 8 years in newly charred white oak casks. While most distillers age bourbon in warehouses that are many stories high, Four Roses ages its bourbon in a one-story warehouse to ensure that each barrel is aged in similar environments. So single barrels, that's one of the unique aspects of them, is that what I taste here on this specific one, technically speaking, right, unless you got the exact same barrel, which is probably unlikely, 66-2Q, as denoted down here, it's very probable that you're going to have a different, experience. With that being said, companies as large as Four Roses, Buffalo Trace's Blanton's line that ages in only that warehouse, H10 clad warehouse, and then like we talked about just now with Four Roses having that one single story, that's all to have a single barrel offering, right? That's still probably specially selected, amongst a team or master distiller. But it's an ability that they can add to their arsenal, as it were, to make sure that their consistency is on par with every single barrel that I buy, whether it's in Maine or California. The small batch, just a real quick alibi, is basically all. This is where the recipe mash bills are a bit different, because the small batch takes those 10 bourbon mash bill ones ranging from 200 to 400 barrels and blends them together before being proofed down, bottled by hand. Just as a little quick alibi. And then with that alibi goes in the chill filtration side of the house, and I got a whole separate discussion that we'll have here before we get into the tasting about chill filtration. But all of Four Roses offerings are chill filtered, with the exception of this private select, with the exception, notable selection, mind you, of the small batch select. Right, I'm sure there's a couple other offerings from the premium end stuff as they decide to chill or non-chill filtered, but their other standard stuff is in fact chill filtered. And so moving forwards, sorry, there's a little fly that happened to make its way in here. I wasn't just batting at ghosts, I promise. Starting at Seagram, this is talking about Jim Rutledge now. In 1966, he recently, I say recently, it is 2022 now. It's kind of hard to believe that 2015 is considered recently, at least in my mind. He retired after 49 years of service. That retirement week, he was quoted saying, "You know what they say about if you love what you're doing, you'll never work a day in your life. I know it to be." So he worked a little bit in that when he got, took a week vacation apparently, and then went over to Castle and Key doing contract distillation for several customers while working on his own project, the J.W. Rutledge Distillery plans, and reviving the heritage brand of Cream of Kentucky. So this is a big industry. Jim Rutledge should not be a new name to anybody, but in his 49 years between Seagram's and Four Roses, Jim said once in 1997, Seagram, who owned Four Roses, had him make a short run of straight rye to supplement the rye whiskey distilled at Seagram's Lawrenceburg, Indiana distillery, now MGP. Right? The production of rye whiskey helped pique his interest in one day distilling rye whiskey for a straight rye brand. When Seagram went out of the beverage alcohol business at the end of 2001, the Kirin Brewery Group purchased Four Roses, and the new owners preferred to keep just to bourbon whiskey. Kirin was not interested in rye. It later became kind of a running joke when people attending various events held at Four Roses would ask Jim, "When are you going to run some rye?" He would respond, "I don't think that will happen anytime soon." Today, Jim and his team of 3 partners are, they're still, doing that J.W. Rutledge distillery, and they're doing a rye whiskey. So he did go on to say, this is going back to Four Roses a little bit, but starting working at Seagram's in the post-Prohibition era, Jim said it was, quote, "the most quality-conscious company I've ever been a part of," and that it was the first whiskey company to install a research and development team, R&D, post-Prohibition. Back then, Seagram had 5 distilleries in Kentucky. Even though each did everything the same, every distillery had its own flavor profile, whether it be the water, the air, the barrels. As you know, no 2 barrels are the same, but everything Seagram did was to achieve consistency, end quote. The R&D among those 5 distilleries led to the discovery of tens of thousands of yeast strains. More than 3,000 of those strains Seagram retained in their library. Jim said by the mid-1980s, Seagram had consolidated its Kentucky distilleries down to the one that Four Roses calls home today. In the 40s, 50s, 60s, they would use up to 10 bourbon flavor profiles from the 5 distilleries to generate consistencies in their bottled bourbons. 4 additional yeast strains were acquired by Four Roses from Seagram Corporate Quality and R&D to be combined with their 2 mash bills to achieve the same level of quality consistency. And that's how those 10 recipes came to be. Now, a little bit about those. So, like you'll note here on this bottle, this is OBSV. And you'll see if you pick up a private select, there will be a different mash bill. There could be a number of different, letters. But the first letter for every recipe is always going to be O. The O indicates that it's produced at the Four Roses Distillery in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky. Four Roses mash bill is the second letter. So that's either going to be an E or a B. E is a 75% corn, 20% rye, 5% malted barley, whereas B is a 60% corn, 35% rye, and 5% malted barley. The third letter will always be S, which designates straight whiskey distillation. That means every recipe will be O blank S blank, right? The recipe becomes a lot clearer when you realize there are only two variables in each recipe, the mash bill and the yeast, right? So you're looking for that second letter and the fourth letter. And those fourth letters are denoted by K, Q, O, F, or V. So that's for the yeast strain. Yeast K is noted by Four Roses as being light spice, light caramel, and full-bodied. Yeast Q is noted as being floral, rose petal, spicy, medium-bodied. Yeast O is noted for being rich in spiciness and full-bodied. Yeast F is predominantly herbal, whereas yeast V is noted as being delicate fruit, spicy, and creamy. Okay, so those are the 10 mash bills that you can all mash together to make 10 different recipes. Fast forward now to Jim Rutledge retired in 2015. In steps that same time, September 2015, Brent Elliott, who becomes the master distiller at Four Roses. However, he's been there since 2005. In 2020, he was named master distiller and blender of the year at Whiskey Magazine's Icon of Whiskey America Awards ceremony. So he's starting to do pretty good things over there too. He's been around since 2015, so that makes about 7 years now in 2022. And so to catch up to 49 years with his predecessor, he's got a few more to go. But he does speak to this offering here a little bit. This is basically surmised from what's inside here, so nothing too telling. But essentially it says the bottle you're holding right now, I might as well hold it, is a perfect example of why Four Roses is unique. We're the only bourbon distillery that combines 5 proprietary yeast strains with 2 separate mash bills, creating 10 distinct handcrafted bourbon recipes. Occasionally, a few exceptionally aged barrels will present themselves, and I personally set them aside. Each barrel selected is bottled without chill filtration at barrel strength. Since we add no water, and along with the results of a little extra aging, each barrel yields only about 160 bottles. We are happy that you are about to experience and enjoy this rare straight from the barrel bourbon. It was hand selected, in this case, by me, him, Brent Elliott, for you to sip, savor, and proudly share. So a little bit more about this. This is OBSV. It's aged 9 years, 10 months, as denoted here in the write-up on the side of the label. Selected by, we would have said that, by Master Distiller, and it was bottled exclusively for the Four Roses gift shops. Okay, and then like I talked about, the difference between this and this is really just two things. So this is bottled at the Master Distiller Select, Private Select. That's bottled at right now for this one at 107.2 proof, whereas this one is bottled at a straight 100 proof. The single barrel, the regular single barrel, is chill filtered, and this is non-chill filtered. One was hand picked, one was not. That's basically the main thing. Other than that, they're using the same OBSV mash recipe. Okay, so they theoretically they can compete with one another. Now, if you were to find another one, OESQ, right, it could taste wildly different, and it wouldn't be a fair comparison. So a little bit about that chill filtration. All whiskey is filtered in one way or other before bottling to remove particulate matter from the barrel, right? Whether it's a cheesecloth or it's chill filtered or non-chill filtered, right? Cheese filtration is a more meticulous refining process, usually performed to remove chemical compounds like fatty acids that can clump together at low temperatures, creating a cloudiness or haze in the whiskey. This clumping, called flocculation, or flock for short, generally occurs only in whiskeys that are below 46% alcohol by volume, the flock point. Although some brands like Jim Beam chill filter up to 50% ABV in order to play it safe. The whiskey is chilled and then run through a series of filters that eliminates these particles. Filters can be made of anything from paper to metal to earth. The type used is proprietary information and generally not disclosed by the distilleries. While chill filtering prevents unsightly haze, many distilleries don't like it because long-chain esters, large molecules which contribute to a whiskey's flavor and mouthfeel, are also filtered out in the process. At the same time, they don't want to put a cloudy whiskey on the shelf. Flocking often occurs during transport when bottles can be exposed to low temperatures. But not all distillers agree. Andrea Wilson, Master Maturation at Michter's, says that removing some of the longer chain esters, quote, really allows us to showcase aspects of the whiskey that might otherwise be masked by dominant characteristics, end quote. Fred No, Master Distiller at Jim Beam, says the only reason he chill filters is to eliminate haze. Quote, You can lose a little bit of flavor and texture while chill filtering, he notes. But we know how to do it right, so we don't lose too much. Eddie Russell, Wild Turkey's master distiller, agrees. Quote, it does take out some of the mouthfeel of whiskey, he says. It also removes a slight hint of the color. Yet, all of Wild Turkey's expressions, except for the Master's Keep series and Russell Reserve single barrel, are chill filtered exclusively to prevent haze, according to Russell. Quote, we first start chill filtration in the early 1990s. It was only when we started shipping Wild Turkey to Japan that we began, as that market was the first to notice flocking. Distiller Lisa Wicker, whose Widow Jane 10-year bourbon sits at 45.5 ABV, just below the flock point, chooses not to chill filter, but she understands why certain distillers choose to do it, quoting, saying, everyone has tasted whiskey that could possibly benefit from chill filtering, noting that chill filtration can remove off notes on the nose or palate just as much as it might affect appealing ones. It's a balancing act, she says. The blender or distiller may be afraid of the negative perception of their whiskey being chill filtered, or if it is a small distillery, they may not be able to pull off the logistics to do it. Wicker chooses not to chill filter Widow Jane because it's intentionally intense. I want to keep everything I blend in the final product, end quote. She also doesn't worry about customers complaining about cloudy whiskey when it's chilled. Questions about cloudy whiskey were more prevalent before consumers became as educated as they are today, she notes. So that's true. That last part, really, chill filtration really came out of, ensuring that consumers weren't afraid they were getting a product that had a bunch of nasty stuff in it, and were questioning where it was from. But places like Four Roses and Jim Beam and Wild Turkey, and really even the craft guys and gals, there's really not a huge concern nowadays. But I will admittedly say I'm in the non-chill filtered camp. I like those fatty acid esters that, long chain esters that stay in, the bourbon. Someone, another bourbon reviewer, I forget where it's from, so if you know it, go ahead, cite it, but had provided a metaphor that sticks with me today, and I think about it, often when I describe this, difference. If you ever had like macaroni and cheese, everybody knows it tastes better, the next day once you've thrown it in the fridge and then microwaved it back up. But when you go to get it out of the fridge, you'll pull it out and you'll notice maybe there's a bit of film on top. That fat has risen to the surface. You would most certainly not scrape it off and throw it in the garbage, right? You want to keep all those fatty, those fats in there, and when you microwave it, give it a good mix, and then you eat it, and it's delicious, right? So there's that fly. I know y'all saw it. So that's a metaphor I use often when describing the difference between chill versus non-chill filtered. But we'll find out right now what one of these two offerings may be a bit better. So I pull these in front of me. I have no idea what's in each glass. They were poured for me. One of these is single barrel regular. One of these is private select, or the other way around. I don't know, but we'll go ahead and move our way left to right. So let's real quick, just a quick comparison. They tend to be, look, this one on the right is maybe a touch darker. So this one on the left is definitely a bit lighter. I'm really having to dig in here to get a nose. This one's got that little heftier nose to it. Both have a floral kind of thing going on. Some oak and floral. It's really all I'm getting, but this one's a bit lighter, both in color and aroma. Excuse me. Oh, wow. So floral's still there. There's I said, oh, wow, because like a big cherry bomb just kind of hit me. But the rye is definitely there, and there's a touch maybe tobacco. They're both supposed to be what? Let me scroll down here. They're both supposed to have, according to that, delicate fruit, spicy and creamy. That's what's been noted, and they're both high rye. Just as a refresher, because I already forgot. OB, right? OB is 60% corn, 35% rye. That's really high, and 5% malted barley. Okay, so it's supposed to have that fruit in there. Maybe that's the cherry I'm getting. It's definitely a creamy kind of bourbon. Extremely light bodied, and there's definitely a splash of cherry. So oak on the back. It's good. It's a good bourbon. Yeah, it's good. Let's go ahead and try this next one. Nobody talked about the aroma, so let's dig into it. Oh, this one's more complex. It truly is. This one's not. There's less cherry. This one had cherry. It's pretty obvious. This one's more like a pear. And the floral's still there. That rye is still there, but it's got this nice sweetness, like a honey, like very maybe date, maybe like caramel perhaps, but not rich. Just like the flavors of that. That's why I'm saying honey maybe, because it's had that like light, thin sweetness. Both light bodied. This one has more depth, but they're about the same body. Maybe this is medium. This is light, medium. Maybe I'll say that. Both got that creamy mouthfeel. Both got oak on the back end. Very similar pours. But the right one definitely takes it all away. It's just got more depth, more oomph. It's got more of this. And it's got some more flavors in there that I just really like. Both extremely balanced. They're both fine pours. And I think, for most people tuning in, Four Roses almost got some kind of cult following because it's borderline a rye. 35% rye? Dang, that's high, right? For a bourbon. So, that's got a following. And the single barrel is going to be, usually something that is hand selected by someone, who knows what they're talking about that works there. Usually the master distiller or his team or her team or master taster or master blender. Somebody who knows what they're doing is going to pick this. And so it's usually a higher quality offering. But we'll go ahead and just grill once more. Maybe there's a splash like green apple on the end. It's got that really light, kind of crisp, summery. That's more of a pear, green apple. Maybe that's what I'm getting it, but very close. All right, we'll do the flip. So glass one, which comes in last against, a two-person flight here, is single barrel. So the light is pretty vicious. Single barrel, which leaves the master distiller selected. The private reserve. Well, if I had to guess going in, I would have guessed that's the outcome. That's what makes the most sense. But sometimes, blind flights prove you wrong. But either way, whether it comes out, where you tasted and the result ended up what you thought it was going to be, it still proves that point because it removes all your biases. So I like non-chill filtered. But so maybe I would have guessed this beforehand. So I challenge you all to try and get a hold of both these bottles, do the same. But let me know what's your thoughts on chill filtration? What's your thoughts on Four Roses and the high rye mash bill? Have you had any of the other private select other 9 mash bills? I would love to get on a flight of all 10, but I think that's a pretty big flight. So I'd have to break that down March Madness style or something. But until then, I'm going to say cheers to you all, and thanks for tuning in. Go ahead, if you like this, let me know, and make sure you like, subscribe, do all that, good, fun, good stuff, and thanks for tuning in.